Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Women's Splain. Today we have a very special guest, Heather Chan. She is the CEO and co-founder of an exciting new skincare company called Moonbow Skin, which just recently launched. I'm going to pass it over to her to give a little intro, and then we're going to dive into her career journey.
Thank you for having me. So grateful to be here. A quick introduction of myself. I also have the same background as both of you, so spent my entire career in the corporate world in private equity and jumped straight into creating a skincare brand. And Moonbow is a traditional Chinese medicine skincare line, and I think it's really a culmination of my background of growing up in Hong Kong. My co-founder is also my twin sister, and she's a Chinese medicine doctor in LA. Wow. And so both of us came together 4 years ago, and we wanted to start this brand, but nothing came of it until I would say a year and a half ago, where I called her and I was like, we just have to do it. And a year and a half comes by and we just launched 5 days ago.
Wow.
5-6 days ago. So
Congrats.
Super exciting. A very new entrepreneur, I'd say.
Awesome. Well, we're so excited to have you here. And obviously, as corporate girlies, we want to dive into, I guess, what really drove you to start this company of yours. So you mentioned you worked in private equity.
Yeah.
What exactly were you doing and how long were you kind of working in that until you were like, all right, I got to do something else?
You know, it's so interesting because growing up in Hong Kong, having traditional Chinese parents, like the social script is you either become a doctor, you are in finance, or you become a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And so that was the general script of what I grew up with. And so I went to this liberal arts college in Maine called Bowdoin College with my twin sister, thankfully.
Oh, wow.
It was a big culture shock, but we made it through.
Hong Kong to Maine.
Oh, yeah.
Middle of nowhere, Maine. Also, Bowdoin. I mean, beautiful, but that is isolated from the city. That's probably crazy.
I mean, when I was 18, I then discovered what a Costco was, and I discovered how big these grocery stores can be. Because in Hong Kong, it's tiny, convenient grocery stores. So a big culture shock. But I would say, you know, after college, I guess during college, I interned in, consulting and finance, and it was just the way to go. And senior year, I got a job in private equity and moved to Denver and stayed there for 4 years. Mm. But, I would say after year 1 and 2, I had this mentality where I was very open to opportunities. At that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. COVID hits, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I think at that point, I was 25 and I was going through this quarter life crisis, this experimental time where I wanted to explore a different type of career. So I was calling people at Christie's and Sotheby's, on whether or not I was a good fit for auction houses, realized I didn't know that much about art history while I did major in art. And then I was even exploring becoming an assistant or working the mailroom at an agency, and a creative agency in LA, from working to fashion. So I was really exploring. And I would say that I have always had this entrepreneurial mindset. And it started in high school, where I went to the summer program and everyone was thinking about different companies to start. So I feel like I've always had this curious mentality where there was nothing that really set the boundaries for me. And I think even in private equity, I was still very curious and intellectually curious as well on trying to discover what I was really interested in. And after 7 years, I found it. So I would say everyone is on their own timeline. My twin sister found her calling when she was in high school. She's always wanted to know that she's always known that she's wanted to be in medicine, though she has background in Western and then changed to Eastern. So I think that's my journey of how I'm here. And then I can also talk about my gut issues and why I started Moonbow, but I'll pause there. I'll let you guys speak.
No, I mean, that's amazing. Love it. I feel like I love that which like this is like a kind of a pattern we've seen with a lot of our founders that interviewed, but they sort of like leave their home, explore, do something completely different, maybe in terms of script, and then end up kind of returning to their roots almost and what they really founded. So I love that. So I'd love to kind of maybe talk a little bit more about what inspired you maybe from your background, your childhood, really drove you to found Moonbow, specifically in kind of this traditional Chinese skincare taking as well. Would love to hear a little bit about that too and what your product is.
So maybe I'll start with my eating habits and the traditional Chinese lifestyle and mindset that I grew up with in Hong Kong. Every single day, whether it was eating pasta or Italian or French or American food or the Chinese food that my parents would cook, we would always have soup. like a broth soup to help with her gut. And everything that we ate at dinner was always freshly cooked, no processed foods, no gluten, no dairy, no nothing like that. So our diet was super, super clean. And I come to the US and eat cafeteria food at college, and my gut issues and my stomach issues completely, flip, where I dealt with debilitating gut issues. I felt lethargic, I felt bloated, and I always felt like this, and I felt like this throughout college, but I never really focused on my health and wellness and took the time and attention to really dig into what was happening. And so when I moved to Denver, I then focused more on my gut health, tried to figure out what was wrong. I got an endoscopy. I got tested for all types of, different intolerances, from celiacs to H. pylori, all these different, issues in your stomach. And I went through that journey, and the doctor then said that I had IBS. So in my mind, I'm just like, thank you for helping me, but that doesn't give me a solution. Yeah. And so that was the same time where my sister Felice was going through Eastern medicine school. So I called her and I was like, I really need help. How can I really fix my gut? And so she then introduced me back to traditional Chinese medicine. And traditional Chinese medicine has 4 pillars, right? The first pillar is acupuncture, and you can become a licensed acupuncturist or doctor to do that. And so that's what my sister does. The second pillar is herbs. So herbs to heal your gut, herbs to heal you internally. The third is food as medicine. So it's what you eat on a daily basis. And 4 is mindfulness. So she really introduced me to going back to our roots of eating holistically, but also mindfulness, which was something I did not do in private equity. I had no wellness routine. I had no morning routine. I woke up very tired, went to the office, came back very tired, and then went to bed. So I think the mindfulness was a really big part in healing my gut. And then I realized that I was so overly stressed and stimulated in private equity that I never took a step back. But when I did put that time to take a step back, my gut completely healed. So yeah, I'm going through different, journeys and different issues now, but it's much better than it was, I'd say, a few years ago.
I mean, I feel like there has just been so much recent research to come out of like mind-body connection, especially like your brain-gut like connection as well. And I mean, me growing up American, like literally with the house was like the most processed food you could possibly think of. Like literally, I grew up on like margarine and takeout. Okay, this is where I grew up. So for me, I went to college and I was like, wow, I'm eating healthier than I did growing up. So I can't imagine like coming from such a clean eating background and then going to like the least healthy portion of your life in Maine without any access to produce. It's like literally wild.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I'm so grateful for the types of diet, the diet that we grew up with, and the traditional Chinese culture and eating whole foods. But because of these herbs that I also took to heal my gut, it's as simple as a chrysanthemum tea or rose tea, or creating a little tea with jujube dates or goji berries. I can name all these different herbs, but I then took a lot of these herbs and made teas and drank this every day, and realized that these herbs are so powerful for you internally and also externally. And from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint, there's a lot of research around how these TCM herbs are also so beneficial for you for the skin. And that's when Felice and I were like, we need to make a skincare brand, especially because number one, skincare is huge in Asia. Our mom sat us down when we were 8 years old and showed us a skincare routine. So it's really been ingrained in our childhood. And number two, skin is your biggest organ, and it's a manifestation of how you treat your body. So it just made sense for us to start a skincare brand.
Yeah, I can really resonate. I'm from Seoul, so a very similar type of upbringing and background of being really mindful of like what you put in your body, on your body. Of course, like the 12-step skincare routine that my mom like calls me. She's like, did you wash your like face and all that stuff, even to this day when I'm like almost 30. But very important. And I think that's something that in Western culture, and now it's being introduced with a lot of companies like Moonbow, but it's still in the very early stages. And you mentioned that Felice, your sister, is a doctor. And so how did you kind of land on the idea of really focusing on traditional Chinese, medicine and skincare?
I think for us, I mean, she is an expert in traditional Chinese medicine, and she went through 6 years of schooling post-college to also get her doctorates. And so with her expertise in traditional Chinese medicine and with my background in private equity, it made sense that we both had opposing skills that then combined to creating a skincare company. And so when we were looking at labs and working on formulations for a year and a half, she was really spearheading the formulations and decided what particular herbs and what certain TCM herbs we wanted in our products. And so we launched with 3 products to also emphasize not a 12-step routine, but a 3-step routine that can also make your face glow. I've been using my products for 6 months, so
you're glowing. That's why you're glowing.
You are glowing, which I feel like it must be where Moonbow comes from, right? Like,
yes.
Like it's a glow, moonbeam.
Yes.
I love that. Well, what is it like founding a company with your sister? I feel like I have not met someone who founded a company with their sibling.
It's so funny because so many people have asked us this, and I always go back and think about, should I have started a company with my sister, or should I have started a company with someone else or a stranger that I am maybe acquainted with? And I think there are a lot more advantages working with your sister. Number one, it then becomes a family business, right? Number two, the communication between us two, we're also best friends. We're identical twin sisters. There's no barrier to communication. And we know each other so well that I really think that, yes, we have our arguments and we have our fights, but we are best friends ultimately, and we solve it in a day, or we solve it. It's like we have an argument and then we call each other 10 minutes later being like, oh, we're sorry, we're fine. And I think ultimately working with, your sister and working with a sibling, as long as you have the same ultimate vision and we have the same vision, 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, if you're working towards that same goal, then everything will be okay.
Yeah, and I think you have a really good setup in that your skill sets are very complementary, and it's really hard to find, if you're building a tech company and you're not non-technical, you have to, balance that out with your skills. If you're building, a skincare company, you want someone that understands the science and actually builds a product and the R&D. So I think that's a really good balance, and something that, we really haven't seen that much. And so I think that's great. And you guys are both full-time on Moonbow currently.
Yeah, so I'm full-time, and she's also a very unique case because she also sees patients every single day, where she has her own clinic. So anyone in LA, go visit Felice Acupuncture. She's in Culver City. But she sees, I would say she's actually trying to condense her hours and see patients in person, because that's what gives her, the soul and the drive. And the biggest pleasure in her life is to be able to help people through acupuncture. And so we can't take that away from her. Mm-hmm. And so she splits her week between seeing patients. And between seeing patients, she works on Moonbow. Wow. On the days that she doesn't see patients, she's more the front facing, making the network, creating the connections, really creating the network within the wellness industry in LA, and we're finding that Moonbow actually resonates more in LA.
I mean, obviously there has been a huge trend of like skincare and like Eastern medicine flowing from Korea and Asia into the US, but I think there is still generally kind of a stigma against Eastern medicine, kind of probably a struggle for a lot of Americans to really understand that. So I was just kind of going to ask of like how you've been able to fight against that, or if that's been a struggle for you guys.
I think the big thing is education, and the biggest challenge to grow Moonbow is education. So a big pillar of Moonbow is to share as much education as we can through social media, through newsletters, through blogs, you name it. And I would say Felice has done a good job thus far to really show people in more digestible snippets on what traditional Chinese medicine is. And, we go through this challenge where people think it's quote unquote voodoo medicine. People have to believe in it, right?
100%. I mean, I know definitely our parents' generation, for sure. I mean, my mom would definitely say that. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, but like, growing, I think that's how she was kind of trained growing up.
Exactly.
Like, Eastern medicine is like quacks and not real. It's obviously not true, but I think it is a stigma that's been recently fought against in the US.
And I think the stigma, while there is a stigma, I feel like we are going the right direction, right? And I think it started with K-beauty.
Totally.
And now there's also a trend in Ayurvedic beauty, right? And then now there's traditional Chinese medicine, and TCM is the fastest growing alternative medicine in the US right now. So I think we're really jumping on this trend where hopefully, right, we are launching at the right time, and we're banking on this trend of everyone focusing on wellness and everyone finding the importance of holistic wellness. And TCM is preventative versus Western. That's, kind of putting a Band-Aid on your problems, not really solving the root cause to your problem.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. And I think Gen Z for sure is completely different within that. I mean, I think Gen Z probably will be the most disruptive generation in terms of wellness. You can even see in their decisions around alcohol and drugs, and their decisions around wellness, I think have kind of like balanced out this extreme millennial Gen X of like fake health, of like being just like extraordinarily thin pretty much, and kind of balanced it out now to a more healthy like area of wellness. So I feel like it's very timely, but it makes sense. It's more fitting in LA, I would say, just where it's like a lot more wellness oriented, significantly more diverse, and younger.
Yes, I'm actually glad that you mentioned the Gen Zs, because when we were doing our initial research on trying to understand market opportunity and where we could fit into the market, we interviewed a lot of Gen Zs, and we came to a conclusion that a lot of them feel overwhelmed. And so that's why we came to the first conclusion, the first initial step on, okay, we want to create a skincare brand that's not just a skincare brand. We want to focus on a lifestyle change, and a lifestyle change that's rooted in the pillars and ethos of traditional Chinese medicine. So introducing traditional Chinese medicine to Gen Zs and the younger generations so they can, make executive decisions on their overall well-being at a younger age versus like me in my late 20s, actually turning 30 at the end of this week, right? Where I'm finally exploring my wellness. So really trying to introduce this wellness lifestyle from an early age.
Yeah. And so you've been kind of taking like a big hold on like the marketing and actually building out the community and then the network as well, right? So how have you kind of found that journey, just wearing 10 plus different hats and building a business?
I think when people say building a community, right, and building a community in all types of startups and all types of companies, especially in CPG, is so important. But when you say building a community, it's effectively building a community on social media, right? You have to have such a strong presence because that's the easiest way to get to the masses. And so while we were at pre-launch for the past year, we really focused on posting 4 or 5 times a week on different pillars of traditional Chinese medicine and different pillars of Moonbow, from education to us being twins to focusing on herbs and lifestyle changes, right? And that's how you can build a community on social media through Moonbow's page, but also Felice's page as a doctor. She has really found the algorithm and found what really sticks with her audience. And so she has really grown on that space as well to create a community of people very interested in traditional Chinese medicine. I would say our next step is focusing on building a community on TikTok, because that's where you get to the Gen Zs and the Gen Alphas. It's a different beast because I do not understand TikTok. But
Gen
we're trying.
Alpha, is that a thing?
That's after Gen
Oh my
Zs.
God.
I
Gen
know.
Alphas
That's
are-
the 2010s.
Gen
That's
Alphas
a-
are the teenagers,
That's a
the
horrible,
preteen.
horrible name. I feel like we need to I don't know. I feel like we need to
The
fight
alphas,
against
I
that. I don't
know.
know.
But they're the biggest purchasers of skincare and beauty now.
That is
Really?
insane.
Yeah.
That is
like when I was
really
14, I was not
insane.
buying skincare.
I mean, they say that your skin doesn't mature and develop until you're, let's say, like 13 to 15 years old. You shouldn't be putting layers of skincare on your skin until your skin matures.
Yeah, and your skin changes so much.
Exactly. They say that in your mid 20s too, you go through another, breakout, or you go through another,
Like a mini puberty. Through
exactly.
Skin. Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
I feel like I certainly did.
Same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you were working on this product for a year before launch, which was this last week. So at what point did you quit your job and go full time with Moonbow?
I'm laughing and smiling because I only stayed in my job for as long as I did to also make my parents happy. And if they're listening to this, they'll know. But I would say I worked in private equity and also worked on Moonbow for 6 months. So worked on both for 6 months and realized that at a certain point, it was so hard for me to progress and so hard for me to take the next steps into Moonbow until I quit. So I waited for my bonus, and then I put in my resignation. And then the first month after quitting, I made strides that I didn't make in my 6 months of also working private equity. Like, I would say the 6 months I was working private equity with Moonbow, I did everything within those 6 months in a span of a month.
Wow. You think that was because you just had more time?
Exactly. More time. And also, it's not just the time, but it's also the focus. You know, when you pull yourself into two different, very opposing careers or mindsets, it's very hard to focus on one thing, and you feel like you're all over the place. So I think that was what was so helpful.
Yeah. And what did you kind of learn in your 7 years of being in finance that you apply to being an entrepreneur? And do you think you could have just become an entrepreneur right after college? Like, are you glad that, you worked in PE?
I honestly am so glad. I'm very happy and very glad that I was able to work in private equity for that long, but also sustain working in private equity for that long. And the biggest skill I would say that I learned from working a corporate job, especially in private equity, is the grit. And as an entrepreneur, one of the biggest qualities I would say for a successful entrepreneur is to be very persistent. You deal with 100 problems every day and you have to find solutions. So I think the mindset of, problem solving every single day, having thick skin, I think was really helpful for me. And to be able to multitask, I think were the qualities, I would say the qualitative qualities that helped in private equity and as well as the quantitative, right? Both of those skills, the quantitative and qualitative, were very helpful for me as an entrepreneur. I would say that if I didn't have my private equity experience, I would have probably given up in my first 3 months of starting a business.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is a common theme we hear too. I feel like we have, like a lot of people that started in finance and consulting. I think like either like obviously it trains you how to work really hard. It trains you how to be persistent, and then it also just gives you an idea of a business and how to work, and there is like a maturity there too, where I think it's really important to have been an employee in order to eventually employ people.
Exactly.
I think it's very difficult to never have had that experience and then all of a sudden be like, go build a team and create an office environment when you've never been on the other side.
Exactly. Yeah, which reminds me, like, I think being in private equity, I then realized all the different pillars and funnels that make a business successful. And without that holistic view, I wouldn't know what to build.
Yeah. Even like making decks, like of course, like when we were analysts, we're like, like another deck. But like that's so important. Like when you're going out and fundraising, like you need to be able to write a consistent story on a PowerPoint.
It's the writing skills, but also attention to detail.
Yeah. Totally.
When we were making our packaging, so our cartons around, the Moonbow bottles or, the tubes that we have, right before we did mass production, I caught a spelling mistake. And I had to beg the lab to change it. And they were so upset with me because they were like, we already created the plates. Like, you can't go through. You already did the payments. Like, you don't have time to recreate the molds and change the spelling mistake. But I was like, I need to do it. And I think that's a lesson learned, that I should have printed everything out and did the training that I had in private equity. But I didn't do it because, you work a million miles a second. But I think that was a lesson learned. Attention to detail.
Yeah, I still print everything out. I have my little pen and go through it.
Yeah, nothing will train you better than being an analyst on how to catch every mistake.
Goodness.
I mean, I literally stare at menus and see double spaces.
I know.
It's not
Stresses
okay,
me out.
but it's great. It will never train you. Would love to just hear a little bit more about the process of actually starting Moonbow and maybe the challenges that you faced in the early days.
Yeah, I think the first step on starting a company is that you have to incorporate your business, make it legal. Once you make it legal, then you need to hire people that you don't have the skill sets to do. So our first 2 hires was a brand designer and finding a contract manufacturer or a lab that can create your skincare. And in CPG, or especially in beauty, your brand positioning is extremely important. And this is what we spent over 6 months really perfecting. We went through multiple iterations with our brand designer on our name, right? We distilled Moonbow from 150 names. We distilled our colors, our ethos, how people want to portray our brand. And how we want people to portray our brand is elevated but elegant, feeling grounded, right? And the colors will resemble, how a consumer feels. And so branding is extremely important. And then once we create the branding, we then at the same time we're formulating products, and the lead time on creating a product, especially in beauty, is 12 months. Oh, wow. From, finding a lab. We actually initially worked with a lab that we worked with for 6 months and didn't like them. They just weren't delivering the quality products that we wanted. So we made an executive decision in April of 2024 to completely change.
Wow. How'd you land on that? That must have been really scary.
Yeah, it was, because we were working with them for so long, and we also invested time and money.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then we realized that we just this product is actually sitting in my bathroom right now from the initial lab, and it's molded, and I look at it almost every day, reminding myself that I made the right decision.
No, sometimes you gotta listen to your gut, but it's scary.
Exactly.
It's scary to pull.
Exactly.
At the end of it. It's really scary.
And you just have to do it, right? And I think that was one of the big decisions that I'm so grateful for. So finding that lab that really resonates with you, that because finding a lab is also, finding the right partner, and you need to resonate with them. They need to understand your ethos. And so once I had a lab and I started formulating products, that's when you get more ideas, and they also can be a resource to help you, right? So for us, we found a lab that was full turnkey, that can make the formulations, to helping you package the product, to getting the product to the warehouse that we're selling, that we're then sending it to customers. So they help end to end. A full turnkey service versus other labs that are actually not full turnkey, right? So you would have to find your own packaging supplier, the carton supplier, the bottle supplier, finding another lab to run micro testings and stability testings versus a lab that can do that all in one, right? So I think those are the two steps: incorporating your business and finding the right hires and contracting them out, is how we started the business.
And how are you able to find a lab? Was it just like word of mouth?
I Googled. The first thing I did was did a deep Google search on contract manufacturers. And honestly, I would say that being in private equity really helped me, because one of my friends was in the consumer space, and she was actually looking at contract manufacturers as an investment thesis. And so I used her research and based it off that, and then found comparable contract manufacturers, looked at them, and then started reaching out to them and cold emailed them. And an easy way and a good way for someone to start either in beauty or in CPG is that there are so many trade shows out there and so many suppliers, so many labs that want to help you, that go to these trade shows, and you will find someone. So if you're lacking a supplier, you will find these people in trade shows, from logistics to packaging to, to manufacture, to everything, really.
Absolutely. What was your testing process as well?
Yeah. The testing in terms of like the efficacy of the product.
Yeah.
So generally for skincare, our lab was really good with it, but they went through, once you create the formulation, and once you say, okay, go, I want to use this formulation, they would then do a micro testing and stability testing. Stability testing is actually testing your product in the bottle, because sometimes, like, if plastic or glass doesn't
react with it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a stability testing, but there's also micro testing on bacteria. So you have to wait, stability testing can be 3 to 6 months. And then there's also compatibility testing, which is the same. And then there's just different types of micro testings on bacteria and all these testings that your lab can do to really prove the efficacy of your product. Right. And it's so stringent in beauty that, when you find a good lab, they will know what to do, and we really depended on that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I know that's obviously scary. Like, we don't want someone to have like an issue, an allergic reaction. You don't want to have an ingredient that maybe reacts with people incorrectly.
Exactly.
Obviously, that's like the biggest nightmare ever, right?
Oh my God. That's why I had to buy insurance today, right?
You just never know.
Yeah. You never know, and everyone's skin is so different. But I think the one step that really gives me comfort is that we went through clinical testing as well. Okay. Clinical testing is an external testing that is not provided by your lab, and it's also very expensive, but it's very worth it, right?
Did you do human clinical trials?
Yes, we did human clinical trials called a safety patch test. Yeah. And so they put on our products for a month on a patch test.
Wow.
To test if any of them had irritations, and it's a cohort of 35 random people, right?
Wow.
And so with these clinical tests, we can then determine, hey, our products are actually safe. And if you do react to it, there has to be an ingredient in it that you're actually allergic to that you probably don't know.
Totally.
Right. And we've done consumer trials ourselves, like not clinical tests, but consumer trials during the process of people, like giving us feedback. Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of these girls trying our moisturizer, started breaking out just on her cheeks. And then my sister always says that she maybe had an allergic reaction to something else. And then the moisturizer was just like maybe an effect on top of it. Cause she was like, if she was allergic to it, she would be breaking out all over her face. But, we get these results and, we try to solve it with them. But in the end, your product isn't going to be perfect for 100% of consumers, and it won't be, but you will find those curated consumers who really love your product and who will be loyal customers.
Yeah, I will say skincare, one thing, it's like the loyalty and retention is super, super high. And people do not switch skincare.
Yeah.
And especially when you're targeting a younger demographic who probably don't have loyal skincare yet. Right? Like, I certainly didn't in my early teens, early 20s. I was experimenting, right? Your skin is changing a lot. I think it's probably harder to get new customers when they're later in age.
I have a different viewpoint. The older you are, the more sticky you are as a consumer. Like, I'm looking at my mom, for example, right? She has a very regimented skin routine because she is really focused on actual results from fine lines and wrinkles and hydration, everything. I think the younger you are, you, number one, are also convinced by TikTok to try all these different products.
Totally, yeah.
But number two, you're in an experimental phase. And so you like to try so many different products that you may actually not be so loyal. And so I've been told, and I have seen also, that Gen Zs and Gen Alphas are actually the hardest demographic to find loyal customers with.
I believe that. They might grow into it, though. It's kind of like you might age with it. It's also so hard to like attain new customers who are older as well, because they're not going to switch.
Exactly. So I would agree with that as well.
Yeah.
So at what age and at what point can you then find a sticky customer, right?
I think mid-20s.
Yeah, probably like our age.
Our age?
Mid to late 20s.
Like
I
right
feel like,
between Gen Z and
I feel
millennial.
like I'm getting to that point now, personally.
Because like if I
think so,
find
too.
a product I like, I would switch it. But now I won't switch unless I
Really,
find an
really
actual
want to.
product that I want.
Yeah.
I would actually agree. Like, I'm just looking at my own skincare routine too. Not only have I used Moonbow products for the past 6 months, but the one other product that I use religiously is snail mucin.
Yeah.
I use that every morning and every night.
Yeah, I also use that every night.
For sure. No, I agree. I use vitamin C like a religious freak, honestly. But
Okay, so I'll give you the orange peel serum. You'll love that one.
I was told to do it, and I was like, it was the one thing I saw results in, but maybe I should switch. But I think 18 early, like your teens and early 20s are tough. I think you are experimental, but also it is like a good time to get a new customer and then grow with them.
Exactly.
So I actually think you have a great target market.
Thank you.
Obviously, skincare, wonderful area, growing a ton, as we mentioned, but it's really difficult because everyone's skin is so different.
Yes.
How did you guys take that approach to creating products you thought would be, good for everyone or really effective?
Yeah, that's actually such a good question because skincare is extremely subjective. And for, my sister and I, we wanted to create a skincare line that could be as effective as it can be to the masses and introduce traditional Chinese medicine and herbs that are very effective. And so the line that we launched with, which is a cleanser, a serum, and moisturizer, you can use it as a set. You could use it individually, whatever suits your routine. But all the herbs that we're putting in and the ingredients are very gentle, but very effective. For example, our serum, instead of putting vitamin C sometimes is quite aggravating to people's skin. Like, I break out whenever I use vitamin C. So an alternative to that is a TCM herb orange peel. Like, I grew up eating orange peel. I grew up eating it in my stir fries, putting in my soups. And it's the actual product, the natural product of orange.
Interesting.
That is also very effective for you and can brighten your skin.
Oh.
So that's an example of alternative ingredients that are natural herbs that are effective, but also very gentle. And so that's our whole spiel, gentle and effective, focusing on traditional Chinese medicine.
That's amazing. What is your target age?
I would say 18 to 35.
Okay. So younger,
Yes.
but like really in that sort of key demo.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the purpose of our products too is a lot of a lot of people who have skin issues because their barrier isn't strong.
Okay.
Until you create a very strong barrier is then when you can see proper results. If you keep on stripping your barrier, and the results of a weak barrier could be dry skin, it could be rosacea, it could be eczema, it could be acne, right? But once you create that layer of barrier, then your skin can then improve and absorb the positive effects of all the ingredients that are out there in skincare, whether Western or Eastern.
Explain a little bit more to me. What does that mean to have a bad barrier? I don't know what that means.
Like, I would say the easiest term, think of it as like a layer on your skin, right? An actual barrier that you need to nourish, right?
Okay.
And a good way to help your barrier is getting rid of the 12-step routine and starting from a very minimalistic routine.
Okay.
Wash your face, put in a serum that will help with hydration, and then put in a moisturizer. And so all our products really focus on, the cleanser, for example, we have centella as the main ingredient, also wild chrysanthemum, so it helps with inflammation. It washes off the impurities from the day, but it also leaves your skin not feeling stripped and dry. And then, of course, the serum and moisturizer, we really want to focus on hydration, right? Hydration is a big key in making your skin glow, making your skin healthy. And then once it's hydrated, once it feels healthy, then you can put on the other products that can help with fine lines or making your face luminizing, focusing on brightening. I hope that was helpful.
No, that makes a lot of sense. That was helpful for me. I feel like I obviously don't have your guys' education, so that's great. I mean, I feel like also there is a lot of, this is like trending out, but there is a lot of like skincare, like obviously overwhelming education that's literally like tone, exfoliate, like strip, especially me that I've very acne prone skin. So I think people who have acne prone skin are often told that, like they're like literally dry your skin out, strip it as much as possible, exfoliate as much as possible. And I definitely saw like much as what I spent like my teenage years doing because I had so much acne.
Yeah.
And I actually saw when I really trended away from that and I actually stopped really stripping my skin, I broke out a lot less, which is kind of like anti what you're told.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
But
my derm in Korea also is like don't like wash your face in the morning. I was like, wait, what? Like, what do you mean? And like I stopped doing the 12 skin care routine, and like now it's a lot better.
It's like, it's so funny because growing up, like, I mean, obviously I spent a lot of time trying to educate myself in skincare too. But when you have a pimple and then you feel like the effects of getting rid of your pimple is pain, right?
Totally.
But in the end, you don't want to feel pain on your skin, right? It's a mentality that it takes time to heal your skin. And the best way to do that is not only putting on topical products, but also healing from the inside. So that's a big part of our education in traditional Chinese medicine skincare, is that you need to nourish your body from within, because that'll effectively come out on your skin, right? Like, for example, like that's why I talk about my gut issues, right? Because my gut issues then resulted in very unhealthy skin. But if you heal your internal gut, then can result in, in an outer reflection.
So in terms of education, the 4 pillars of the topical and the oral type of wellness, how do you tie that in together with your products?
Yeah, I think there's a big trend on social media now that I'm very grateful for, but it's eating your skincare, right? And I think that's one of the big educational points that I think is easy to understand and easy to digest. Just buy the herbs and buy the ingredients. You can get it in Chinatown in New York, or you can get it on Amazon and boil it and make it into tea and eat these herbs, right? And I think that's one way that we really want to educate people. And my sister does such a good job as well, and also educating people from, eating your skincare from the herbs and the food. She creates these like small snippets on the benefits of different herbs. As simple as black sesame. We all know what black sesame is, but if you have very thinning hair, that helps nourish your hair and your scalp, right? Wow. That's an example.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, because like when you think of thinning hair, I'm like, I take so many different types of collagen and like biotin, but like you don't know that it's also found in these, rich ingredients that are herbs or just in like our food.
In food, and exactly, and all the food that is available to you is so beneficial, but no one talks about it. And I think it's just the Western mindset of how we think about food, right? I would say, I grew up in a childhood where food was not just sustenance, but food was also to heal, right? And and my sister and I are trying to also share that with the Western world.
Yeah, that's great. And then do you see kind of other kind of product lines for Moonbow related to like food or any other
I think the
things?
idea, like our 5-10 year vision, well, hopefully 5 years, is that my sister's practice will merge with Moonbow, right? So she'll focus more on the practice and grow that. I'll focus on Moonbow. It'll effectively synergize to become not just skincare, but a wellness brand, a lifestyle brand. And then once we become this lifestyle wellness brand, then we can think about ingestibles, right? And we actually were thinking about creating ingestibles for Moonbow versus a skincare line. But ingestibles goes through a lot more FDA approvals and regulations. But as a doctor, right, from Felice's mindset too, when you think about the herbs and when someone goes to acupuncture, she then, gives them a protocol of what herbs they need to take to heal themselves. It's very unique and bespoke to that patient and to that person. And so when we wanted to think about ingestible, she was like, I can't just create one, gummy or one, ingestible tea to help a cause of all, of everyone's problems because it's so bespoke. And so that's why we decided not to go the ingestible route.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess something that I wanted to ask you, just growing up, this immigrant mindset as wanting to be a doctor or a lawyer and, and go in finance, and there's no other type of right answer for our parents. And like I also, went through the same thing. How did they react when you were like, I'm going to pursue this full time?
I think my mom was definitely more understanding. It took my dad a good 6 months to convince him that I could make a career out of this. And to him, success is very related to money and status. Success to me is happiness and fulfillment. And I think it was that shift in mindset that took him a while to understand. And I think when he realized that, my sister and I were actually working 10 times harder, or I was working 10 times harder than I was in private equity because I was so fulfilled and I was very, determined to make something, beautiful. I think that's when he realized that I could make a career out of it.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard for
Yeah.
our parents, right? I mean, they are trained in a really different mindset. And I think it's hard for them to also, they want to protect you. They want you to be okay. They want you to have a good life. I mean, it's not like being an entrepreneur is hard. It's not secure, right?
It's not secure. And I think being an entrepreneur too, it's a luxury. We are very fortunate, all of us. Like, if you guys want to be entrepreneurs too, that we can do it. And that's why I decided to start something. I'd rather take a risk now before, I get older, before I want to settle, before I think about having a family. It's better to take a risk now than never, right? And I feel like if I didn't start this company, I would still be at private equity 10 years down the line, probably made a lot of money, but would I have been happy or fulfilled? Probably not.
Yeah. What do you think has been the biggest challenge of being an entrepreneur?
I think the biggest challenge is that it's a very lonely business. You don't really have a team that you can really, lean your shoulders on. And yes, I have my sister and I'm so grateful. So I think having a co-founder actually helps with that. But being lonely is a big challenge. The second thing I would say, and the second challenge is you have so many questions and you deal with so many problems, and the answer isn't in front of you. You have to figure it out yourself. And the decisions that you make all these decisions, you don't know whether these decisions are actually right for your company, but you have to trust yourself. And I think that's the hardest part about building a business.
And like when you're faced with those kind of unknowns, like who do you kind of, lean on or look for in terms of, do you have like mentors, other people in the community here in New York, LA?
I think the one thing, and my goal this year, is to actually find a mentor of another beauty founder who's maybe 5 to, 7 years ahead of me that I can really lean on and talk to, who's also very invested in me. But finding a mentor takes time. So I would say the people that I lean on are I'm just so lucky, and thank you TikTok for this, but I don't have that many followers on TikTok. I maybe have 400, but I was able to find a very good community of other entrepreneurs in the beauty space. And I actually found this one other friend who went to Wharton, who started a skincare company 4 months before I did. And so she's a little ahead of me, where I was able to ask her a lot of questions. And when you're an entrepreneur and you realize that you have no one to rely on, creating that network is so much more important, where every single day I try to meet different people from different industries, but who are also entrepreneurs, because they will know something that you won't know. Someone in the food industry, if they have a brand designer that they recommend, if they have a lawyer. Like, for example, 3 weeks ago, I realized that I didn't have insurance for Moonbow. So there's a Slack community called Startup CPG. I just slacked and said, hey, I'm looking for insurance. Do you have recommendations? So there's a lot of resources out there and a lot of communities for entrepreneurs that you can really lean on, which I think is very important and also very relevant to New York.
Yeah. And how have you kind of found the founder community in New York, especially within CPG being like a minority one?
Yeah.
I know it's like a very white heavy space, and now there's a lot more non-white people, but how have you kind of found that?
I think it really just starts with talking to one person. When you talk to one person, they will then give you suggestions on who you want to follow, who you should reach out to, and then it kind of has a snowball effect. But I think the one thing that has really helped me learn are podcasts like these, and people that I really listen to on how to start a business. There's this one podcast, it's Nancy Twine's podcast. She interviews a lot of people in the beauty space, from, really successful CEOs to investors, and I listen to her podcast almost every week. And same as Maggie Sellers. Those are the two podcasts that I listen to. But that's my saving grace.
Well, that's great. I mean, we started it for that reason. We want to help young people, be able to do, I think, a lot. Obviously, what an entrepreneur looks like is not necessarily, it's changing. But I think there's also been, sort of a clapback almost to, like, this is for the first time, like, in literally 25 years, the last 2 years, has been less fundraising going to women, and women have, their pay gap has actually increased. So I think it's just really good to highlight people like you, especially with more of a traditional background, who are able to do it. Yeah.
And I would also say, like, we are planning to fundraise in the summer, and I have a background in 7 years of fundraising in private equity and fundraising institutional capital. But when you fundraise from a startup perspective, what you learn is completely different. And I'm realizing that it's actually a lot tougher to be able to fundraise in a very different size, right? The mentality and the skills that I learned to fundraise in private equity aren't directly relatable. And so even as someone with my background, it's still going to be really challenging, because you have to start from the ground, from ground zero.
For sure. I mean, my background in, like, VC and growth, I saw that on the other side of just, like, a lot of times, I mean, it's a very abstract decision when it's early. And a lot of it is just connecting to that person and that person feeling connected.
Exactly.
And that's not really, it feels more like dating than it does like finance almost. And I think, already being like a CPG beauty brand, a lot of times you already have a strike against you. I think it's a really difficult fundraising environment. I think, like, a lot of times it's auto-corrected, but also, I mean, obviously you guys are so smart and you have so much passion that you go find the right person.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've been told to not do skincare. I've been told to not launch in skincare, right? I've been told otherwise, where it's so saturated you won't be successful. But being told and being effectively put down honestly makes me work even harder. I think that's how I work. And I somehow just want to prove that, an Asian American, an immigrant, can start a very successful business in the US and share, the magic and the powers of traditional Chinese medicine.
Absolutely. And also, I mean, honestly, no matter what people are going to say, whatever you're doing is wrong. Like, whenever you start a company, right? So if you're in a saturated market, it's too saturated. If you're in a new market, it's too early. If you're doing this, whatever. And I've actually heard in a lot of saturated markets, like swim, for example, I just heard, like, a speaker talk about this. She was like, when I first started, there were a million swim brands. And then now 10 years later, I'm the only one left. So, like, do you know what I'm saying? She's like, if I had started and there was no competition, I would not be nearly as good as I am, and I wouldn't have survived. So
exactly.
It's just like, no matter what you do, people are going going to be naysayers.
Yeah.
But I think that your guys' brand is super unique. And
thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important in your, initial research is within a saturated market, you will always find a white space. And so our white space is traditional Chinese medicine inspired skincare. There are brands that exist in the US, but not that many, maybe 4 to 5. But the ones that exist are more premium priced, and they cater towards the Gen X, the older generation. But there's no traditional Chinese medicine inspired skincare brand that caters towards the younger generation. So that was a clear gap in the market that we hypothesized, and we found a conclusion to based on what these consumers are wanting and needing.
Yeah. No, I think it's great because like I go to acupuncture all the time and parents are always like, oh, it'll be good for your skin. I'm like, how is that connected? And so like it's really good to see like that connection from like the different 4 pillars you were talking about, and even like with ingestibles.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have, thought that if I hadn't, had this conversation with you. And I feel like I'm very in tune with this. So I'm like, hopefully our listeners learn something new. And, I think education, as you said, is really, really important.
I agree. I'm going to digress a little bit, but speaking of acupuncture, there is cosmetic acupuncture as well. And cosmetic acupuncture is a more natural version of quote unquote Botox, right? Where the needles will then effectively stimulate the collagen in your face to help with fine lines. And so
you do it in your face.
Yeah. So there's needles. So it's so funny because my mom went to see my sister in LA a few months ago. My twin is like, Mom, you have no wrinkles. So I would say that my skin is probably just genes. But it's another alternative to help with fine lines and wrinkles versus the Western route of Botox, of injecting in your skin that effectively freezes your skin. And my sister can say otherwise, and obviously she's the doctor, but she has told me that she sees so many patients that get Botox poisoning, right?
Oh yeah, no, Botox is bad. I mean,
Yes.
I do not have it. I have gone back and forth on getting it many, many times. I probably need it at this point. But, like, honestly, it does freak me out because it just seems crazy to inject that level of toxin in your skin.
Exactly.
And then also, like, I think preventive Botox is bullshit. I honestly really do.
I do too. It's a trend.
It's just a
like
marketing
these Gen
trend.
Zs are getting Botox. I'm like, you're 22. Like, you don't need this.
It's a marketing trend. You really don't need it. So for
and
those
it's, like,
listeners,
the best way to get recurring
exactly.
revenue. I mean, it's just like, yeah. And I'm like, please stop injecting unnecessary toxin into your skin when you don't even have wrinkles. Like, please wait until you have a visible
Thank
wrinkle.
you. This needs to be said.
And then it will literally be evened out. Like, do you realize Botox is very effective? It's literally, like, it literally freezes your fucking face. Like, just wait. Wait until you can see one. And then, like, and then inject a toxin into your face.
Exactly.
Like, I don't know. But this is great. I would totally do cosmetic acupuncture.
Okay, so for
Googling
those
that
listeners, yes, cosmetic acupuncture, I think, so there's like, yes, the education, but acupuncture is also not cheap, right? So there's that barrier to entry where I was talking to a friend who gets Botox and I'm like, why aren't you doing cosmetic acupuncture? And she was like, it's a lot more expensive. And she was like, yeah, I do Botox maybe twice a year versus cosmetic acupuncture where you have to go more regularly to see results, right? Acupuncturists say that you have to go at least 6 to 8 times to really see effective results. And that's why traditional Chinese medicine is a patient medicine. So do you want to make a decision where you want to find the fundamental issue of whatever you're going through and take that time to do so? Or do you want to go the Western route and put a Band-Aid on the solution and continue to put Band-Aids that could effectively lead to something worse, right? So it's one's decision. Yeah.
I mean, it's hard because, like, we live busy, difficult lives. And sometimes you do need a Band-Aid. Sometimes you do need your symptoms relieved, and sometimes you do need it now, right? And there also isn't, like, a ton of Eastern medicine in terms of access here, right? I mean, like, in New York, I'm sure, and in LA, I'm sure. But if you're not in, like, a huge cosmopolitan area, like, where are you going to go?
Yeah.
And it's not covered by your insurance.
It's not. No. So that's another topic that we can discuss later. But that's the thing. It's not covered by insurance because the Western medicine doesn't see or portray acupuncture as, an effective medicine because it's traditional, right? Though TCM is based on over 3,000 years of studies and research, right? And that's one question that we get a lot on our socials and online. Everyone always asks where to get acupuncture in Oregon, where to get acupuncture in Ohio, in Denver. But there are acupuncturists because in a lot of these states, there's big Asian communities, through a lot of immigrants who moved to those states, and a lot of them do have acupuncture. So I'd say those are the Chinatowns of the states, and the Chinatowns of each region. That's where I would recommend people to go find it. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's amazing. Well, I am so excited to try your skincare.
Thank you.
Yeah, after looking at your skin, I'm like,
amazing.
oh my gosh,
like,
I gotta be like Heather.
like gleaming.
Just look closer.
No, you're glowing.
No, you're glowing. And well, this has been amazing. I feel like we've delved into so many topics. I'm so excited for you and your sister.
Thank you.
We always end on, what advice would you give to a young person looking to start their own company?
Don't conform to the boundaries of what your work is telling you to do. My biggest advice is always be intellectually curious. When I was working in private equity, I was putting my time as well on working and helping other startups for free. So at that time, I was helping this other ingestible startup. I was helping this startup, this fashion startup. And I reached out to them and said, hey, I just want to learn and I want to get the experience and I don't want to get paid. So I think being intellectually curious and putting yourself out there and just learning is what really helped me go to that next step. So I would say that's my biggest advice. Always be intellectually curious, and the boundaries are endless and you make your own boundaries.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that advice. So inspiring. I'm inspired.
Thank you.
I'm inspired too.
Yeah.
Where can we find you? Where can we buy Moonbow?
You can find, so Moonbow's website is moonbowskin.com. Our socials are moonbow_skin. And I actually really recommend following my sister. Her handle is Dr. Felice Chan, Felice. She shares a lot of educational points on what traditional Chinese medicine is. And then you can also follow me if you just want to learn more about the entrepreneurial background.
People love that.
_ Heather J Chan _ on, this is all on Instagram. And then it then relates effectively on TikTok. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on, Heather.
No, thank you for having me.
It's amazing. Well, please email us womansplainpod1@gmail.com or womansplainpod in our socials. If you have any questions for Heather or anything else.
Yes, please reach out. I am here as a resource and a mentor.
Thank you so much. Thanks for listening, guys, and thank you, Heather.